Welcome everyone to the virtual breakout session of Zionism 3.0 2021 Futures Workshop. My name is Leah Garber. I'm Vice President for Israel Engagement at JCC Association. For those who are not familiar, JCC Association is the largest platform for Jewish engagement in North America and the umbrella organization for JCCs in North America. In addition to my role at JCC Association, I'm a very proud member of the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition, a vibrant professional network of over 200 Israeli organizations and leaders working both on an individual and collective basis to connect the Israeli society to World Jewry. And basically, this is what Z3 is all about. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today. For those of you who are attending Z3 since this morning, thank you for joining this Peoplehood Coalition team. If this is your first session of the day, I'd like to take a minute to orient you a little bit. This is the 7th year of Z3 conference. And this hybrid event this year, the goal is to focus on future scenario which will influence the relationship between diaspora Jewry and Israel. The utility of the exercise is it allows us to experiment with potential solutions for possible scenarios. Moreover, it lets us out different, appropriate, and controlled in a safe environment. And the earlier session, for those of you who followed, was fascinating. So earlier session, the main plenary session, we discussed a hypothetical scenario that is placed in the year 2025. And now we will be discussing specific development in that said future. So in the chat box, you could see the scenario, hopefully. Our session today will be broken up into two sections. In the first section, we will hear from our panelists, experts that are deeply involved in the Peoplehood Coalition in Israel. And we'll learn about some of the trends and initiatives in this space. Then at our second part, we will delve into a specific scenario and hear our speakers' perspective and proposed action plan that they could share with us. And then hopefully we'll have some time to open it up for a few Q&A that hopefully you have. So feel free to put them in the chat box at any time. So it is my great pleasure to introduce two dear friends. I'm here from Israel, but I flew into Palo Alto today, but our two panelists are actually based in Israel right now. Two dear friends from the Jewish Peoplehood, Naama, Klar, and Barak, Sella. Naama, let's begin with you. Please take a few minutes to share with us your personal and professional passion for Jewish peoplehood. Knowing you for many years, I know that you have a very special perspective, and I would love for all of us to hear. And also tell us a little bit about your former involvement with the Re'ud Institute and the coalition.
Hey, Leah. Good evening. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with very dear friends. And I have to say that my way to Jewish peoplehood was basically based in Zionism, because I came to realize in about 2016 that Israel's role, being the national homeland of the Jewish people, is eroding, is getting off tracks. And after carefully examining and researching this issue, we came to realize that the only way to mend the trajectory of Zionism is to insert a sense of Jewish peoplehood within the Israeli society. So it sounds a bit weird, right? Because Jewish peoplehood is much more ancient than the Zionist movement or the State of Israel. But from that perspective, I actually got to be one of the people that devotes their professional lives to Jewish peoplehood within Israel. I think Israel used to be the national homeland in many very good ways. For example, being open to Aliyah, being open to Jewish migration, it's still an amazing thing. It's just not enough and as powerful as it was 30 years ago, and for good reasons. So we have to make sure Israel stays the Jewish homeland in the future. And that's why we're promoting the sense of peoplehood within Israel. I see the erosion in the sense of Jewish belonging and Jewish peoplehood within Israel as a meta-strategic threat. Our breakdown to sub-narratives, Judaism as a religion, Judaism as a nationality in Israel, is extremely dangerous for the long-term existence of the Jewish people, and this is why I chose to tackle this specific issue. In the recent 8 years, I've been working for the Re'ut Institute. The Re'ut Institute is a think tank where our specialty is blind spots. And one of the blind spots we've been exploring in 2016 was Israel's status as the Jewish homeland erosion. And now when through it, I've established the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition in Israel. Barak, who took upon this mission now, and myself will tell more about it soon. I'll just say that 3 months ago, I moved to ANU, the Jewish People Museum. It's the biggest Jewish museum in the world, and we have a lot of educational activities. The reason I've moved is because I've identified a window of opportunity to promote peoplehood, mostly in Israel. In Israel, there is huge ripeness. Outside of Israel, the challenge is a bit more complex. But I was looking for a national platform that has the legitimacy to enhance the sense of Jewish belonging. And that was the reason I moved to ANU. And I hope to continue this mission there in very different instruments, but with exactly the same intention.
Thank you, Naama. Beautiful. And as we could see on your background, the beautiful sites of ANU, the remodeled museum, which I strongly recommend to visit. So thank you. And we'll get back to you later. Barak. So you're the new director of the Re'ut Institute, taking over Naama. Big shoes to fill, but I know that if anyone, you could do it. Barak, could you tell us a little bit about the realm in which the Re'ut Institute operates and the reasons? Naama touched a little bit about that, but I would love for you to elaborate the reasons that led the Re'ut Institute to launch the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition, a coalition that is an ever-growing coalition.
So that's a great question. So the Re'ut Institute, as Naama said, is a think tank that tries to tackle the ability to influence and promote different policies among institutions and leaders in Israel, with the goal of dealing with, as she said, blind spots and strategic issues for Israel society and for the Israel state. Over the years, Re'ut dealt with many different issues, from economics to the conflict. And I think in recent years, thanks to the very talented people who worked at Re'ut, Re'ut was able to identify that there is a big gap between the way people in Israel or the institutions in Israel sort of perceive the connection between Israel Jewry and World Jewry and sort of their assumptions, but where reality is actually going. And when the gap between where reality is actually going and where we think it's going becomes bigger and bigger, then we have potential for a lot of surprises and not so nice surprises that can create really big strategic challenges for the state of Israel. The Kotel crisis of 2017 was an example of such a crisis. And it really came from many Israelis out of left field. Many Israelis didn't even know what is this issue? Why is it so significant? And it just showed how people were not aware of the issues that are really on the minds of world Jewry, specifically American Jews. But many American Jews are not really aware of the issues that are on the mind of Israeli Jews. And so the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition was really created to try and shift the needle, to try and create a different perception within Israeli society. We identified that it's a field that's really full of a lot of talented people and a lot of devoted leaders, but that are all isolated and working alone and not coordinated. As Jews, people tend to sometimes emphasize their differences instead of finding ways to work together. And the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition tried to change that narrative, tried to change that dynamic, while also pushing forward a new type of idea, which is actually an old idea from Mordechai Kaplan, Jewish Peoplehood, Amiyut Yehudit, to try and update, in many ways, the way I see it, update our Zionist agenda or our sort of Zionist ideology of what is the state of Israel and what's this relation between Israel and World Jewry. I'll just say from my perspective, I joined the coalition as, just like a random member about almost 2.5 years ago, when I was privileged to go on shlichut for the Jewish Agency. I was a shaliach in New York from 2017 to 2019. And for many years, I worked in education in Israel society. I originally was born in the United States and made Aliyah when I was 10, just a kid. But joining Israeli society, I really put that, at the back of my mind, worked my whole adult life in education and activism. And when I went to America in 2017 and lived there for 3 years, my eyes reopened, not only to my personal identity, but to these issues and to the things that are on the minds of American Jews. And when I came back to Israel, I was fortunate enough to get a WhatsApp message about some event. Jewish people who had never heard of this, but felt like, okay, wow, this is what I was looking for. I was looking for a way to continue to engage and to find a community of people. And the first time I met Naama and I met the people of the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition, I saw a room full of, at that event, about 100 people, and said, okay, these are people who are thinking like me, who are trying to make a change and change the dynamic between Israel and the United States. And from them, it just went, it grew and grew. And today there's hundreds of people, individuals and organizations that are part of the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition.
Barak, it's interesting. You're saying people that think like you. I think that all of us, including myself, members of the coalition, and many of us are former shlichim that sort of fell in love in the concept of a wider Jewish world than just us in Israel. But we see through the WhatsApp conversations, the fascinating, I should say, WhatsApp conversations, that we all care. We're all in this because we care, but we do have some fascinating conversations and arguments about different perspectives. And earlier in our earlier session here in Palo Alto, two Israeli journalists, Gal Gabay and Ben Dror Yemini, had sort of like a semi-argument about different perspectives. So could you talk a little bit about the different perspectives that are being reflected through the coalition, because they're organizations from across the spectrum?
For sure. So first of all, even here in this room, me and Naama built the coalition and was the director before me, and I'm now doing her role, but we're coming from very different backgrounds. We come from, I would say, maybe opposite political backgrounds, different places, different communities. And honestly, me and Naama, I think, see eye to eye on many issues, but on many issues, we are totally in disagreement. So when I said people who think like me, I think the main thing that I would want to emphasize is people who see the most important thing is that the Jewish people is a whole, and that's an unbreakable issue, and that's undividable. When we're seeing the world, the Western world mainly, going into deep polarization, is the Jewish community, is the Jewish nation, a counter to that polarization? Are we able to create a space where we hold our differences and are, have enough confidence in ourselves to be able to engage in those different opinions and learn from them? So I would say there's many different issues, especially on issues of the relation between religion and state, issues of giyur, I forgot the word in English for how conversion, for sure. Issues of political issues between Israel and the United States. Of course, internal Israeli political issues are very tense, and definitely I would say even about the Kotel, and I would say in the coalition there is more openness to different religious streams and different views of Judaism, but still there's many people who are very passionate about where they're coming from, and sort of the things that what's more important, education, or advocacy, hasbara, political ties, community organizing. Where do we need to put our resources? At the end, we're mostly working for nonprofit organizations that are working with resources that need to be allocated somewhere. And there's agendas and there are priorities, and it's not easy to get organizations that in the past saw each other as competitors to try and work together for a shared agenda. And that's not, I'll tell you, that's not an easy issue to do. But thankfully, I'm joining the party that Naama has sort of organized for the past 3 years. And I think she could definitely also give some examples from recent years.
Yeah, it's a great party. It's a lot of fun. And I think that the diversity is basically the beauty of this party. It's the strength of the party. As Zach Bodner said earlier in the opening statement, we're united, not necessarily uniform. And I think that that's our strength. So Naama, back to you. What are some of the most significant opportunities and challenges that this ecosystem of Jewish peoplehood faces today? And we all know that the Kotel compromise is back on the agenda, so that's just to name one.
So the biggest opportunity we have now in Israel is the fact that Jewish peoplehood is actually in fashion. There's demand for Jewish peoplehood content for Israelis, especially in the fields of leadership and education. It's a bit similar to what we've seen 5 years ago with the issue of the 4 tribes that President Rivlin had promoted. It became fashionable too, and organizations were looking for content in this field. And now I think the fashionable content would be peoplehood. I see it at ANU on a daily basis, since groups that wouldn't have been coming 2 years ago, maybe very conservative groups, maybe very orthodox groups, are coming to explore and engage with the issue of peoplehood. And we have to make sure to make the most out of it, because it's gonna pass. Something new is gonna come, and we have to cash out all this Israeli attention on the issue of peoplehood. The second big opportunity is a very favorable government. And it's not just in the ruling parties. We have political partners now in almost all the parties. Before the recent elections, Reut had gathered an event asking for the parties to present their agenda, their platform on World Jewry. And we made sure to write it all down, translate it into English, so we can come and ask for things to be done in the day after. And most parties, I'm just excluding one, actually participated, and 4 out of them wrote a platform especially for the event. Just since we've asked. The Jewish people is still a very important issue in Israel, and just making the ask made it happen. And this government can be very formative in Israel-World Jewry relations and in the Israel position within the Jewish people as a whole. And we make sure to keep pushing on those issues and make sure it stays in the priority. I think this is the second biggest opportunity. COVID-19 also created some new era of long distance relationship that has its disadvantages, but we have to make sure to make the most out of it, especially in opportunities for encounters between Israelis and non-Israelis, mifugashim. It does have some very negative effects that we will have to face. I'm not even sure we're there yet. I'm not even sure we're meeting the consequences, but we have to make sure to make the most out of the advantages it brings. Anything you would like to add, Barak?
Barak, if I could just focus the conversation based on what Naama shared with the government and all the opportunities, and Dr. Nachman Shai, the Minister of Diaspora, addressed the conference earlier today, and he is extremely in favor of the work of the coalition. Based on what Naama said and the very hard and diligent work of the coalition, could you share maybe if and how the needle has shifted a little bit in terms of the climate?
For sure. So Israel, as we know, is a society that goes through rapid changes. We're not a gradual society. We don't take our time in changes a lot of time and in reactions. So I would say an interesting thing, you can see if the past, many Israelis had a very, I would say, rigid perception of Zionism. I would say in the past 10, 20 years, we've gone in many ways to extreme globalism. And you can see it sometimes how up until the 90s, any Israeli living outside of Israel was a Yored. And now there's no more Yored, there's only relocation. It goes from total, cancellation of a different choice to total exception with no, process in the middle. But still, because of the complex Israeli reality that we're dealing with, most Israelis are not really aware to what's happening outside of Israel and not are really aware to what's happening with the Jewish communities. But we are, as Naama said, seeing a change. I can give a personal example for myself that I think is really indicative. So youth movements in Israel, for example, are a very big thing. 1/3 of Israelis' youth and kids are members of youth movements. So we're talking about 350,000 kids. I grew up in a youth movement, in a labor Zionist youth movement. I was a member for many years. Not once did anyone talk to me among the tons of hours of issues and conversations about World Jewry and our connection. Today, each of the 15 youth movements in Israel has a special person appointed to be a Jewish Peoplehood coordinator. And this is something that happened with work of many different organizations, Jewish Agency and the Ministry of Education and Diaspora Affairs. And that's changing the needle. We now have hundreds of thousands of kids who have Jewish Peoplehood education at their youth movements. And that is a very significant change. We now have, for example, different training courses. If it's the cadets for state positions or different things like that, or academic, where they have Jewish Peoplehood content. We slowly have more and more ministries, especially the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, which is budget is growing, which is a significant step forward. But we also have other ministries who are thinking of what is our Jewish Peoplehood policy. We have new, what we call ecosystem organizations like Enter, or Minhelet Ami, the WZO that is now becoming more a Peoplehood organization. We have organizations that are coming up and looking at themselves as Peoplehood organizations and sort of umbrella organizations. And that's very significant because we have more people who can lead a wide range of policy in Israel, together with all the tens and hundreds of players that are entering this field. So I would say definitely there is a change. We're now still in the beginning of exposing the crisis, of exposing the gap, of understanding the concept. Still, most people in Israel do not know what Jewish Peoplehood is, or how we say Amiyut Yehudit. It's still a foreign concept, and we have a lot of work to get it into the education system, into the army, into public sector, into municipalities, ministries, training courses, academia. We still have a lot of work to do, but the needle is, as Naama said, it's going in our favor. Now, the question is how hard will we take advantage of this momentum?
Wonderful, and I'm so glad that you shared a little bit of optimism with us, because our next part of the conversation is less optimistic. So it's good to start positive, and maybe we'll be able to add with some positive questions. So I'm sure that all of you here, after learning a little bit about the wonderful work of Naama and Barak, understand why we decided to invite them to play the game with us, this war game of the future. And now that we the baseline, you understand the baseline of what's happening in the field today, we would like to transport into this future in the year of 2025. So with no further ado, I invite you to sit back and allow me to read the following scenario and share it with you. So it is the year 2025, 7 years since the coalition was founded. And despite some significant successes, as you just mentioned, Naama and Barak, both of you feel that there is a shift in the discourse. Israel faces more internal tensions and seems to be in a shift away from a crisis, an internal crisis. And some of the member organizations in this coalition begin to waver in prioritizing the idea of global Jewish peoplehood. On this backdrop, you learn about the Haggadah insert. And I'm hoping that you could see the Haggadah insert in the chat box now. The Haggadah insert, and you recognize this potential crisis can lead to call for an immediate meeting of your most committed and engaged members of the coalition. And you would like to see how we could navigate this blowback that this insert is raising. However, to make things even worse, as if this is not enough, the Kotel Compromise of 2023 is now being at jeopardy, as many in Israel call to revoke any provisions given to the United States Jewry. So your members on the coalition, who are sort of like the choir that there's no reason to preach to because we're all so invested, are starting to sing different melodies. How do you react to that? So before I ask you some specific questions, just a general reaction to this very scary scenario. Naama, let's maybe start with you.
So it actually really reminds me of a very traumatic event for me that kind of went under the radar, which was a survey that was taken post Guardian of the World's operations that surveyed young American Jews and gave very, very bad feedback on Israel. I think if I'm not mistaken in the numbers, so about 25% thought Israel is actively an apartheid state to some extent. From what I've examined on the validity of the data, it didn't seem fake or anything. It seems that the scientific validity stands. I'm also very historically aware, and I see some spiritual connection between this traumatic survey and very damageful events happened at the night of 9 of Av at the Israel platform at the Western Wall, which was a very brutal reaction to an egalitarian prayer that took place there, which is exactly what brought the 9 of Av to begin with. So I know there is no connection in real life, but I do think spiritually that it can be connected. And when I hear this insert about the Haggadah initiative, that's what rings a bell more than anything else.
So Barak, do you see the domino effect that could happen follows this Haggadah insert and the danger in it?
Yes, I think so. This scenario is basically taking several scenarios that we sort of tasted in the past and really, turning up the volume to 100. So definitely, if we had this perfect storm of everything happening at the same time, we could definitely see this kind of effect, sort of sending us, I would say, 20 years backwards in where the public perception of the connection between Israel and the diaspora needs to be. In many ways, we could see this, intangible effects of people losing budgets. Okay, like the state of Israel, not a lot of people know this. People think that only the, World Jewry donates money to Israel, The actual fact that the state of Israel invests a lot of money in different programs and organizations abroad, and we could definitely see this kind of effect. Having NGOs and organizations lose tens of millions of shekels from their resources. We could definitely see this sort of, alienation or crisis pushing Israel and the state of Israel into more problematic relationships internationally. We can talk about, the strategic connection between Israel and the United States. And if, the relationship between Jews of Israel and the United States becomes so fraught and so contentious, what would be the justification, to talk about the connection and the alliance between US and Israel? We've even seen this in the past of talking about, well, we don't need to invest in our relations with American Jews. We need to invest our relationship with evangelical Christians. And so definitely if we would see this crisis, it could, cancel a lot of agreements, things that we're talking about, like Israeli tourism. During COVID-19, we were able to maintain a level of tourism from the United States, from special programs, even during COVID. Would these continue? People would lose their jobs. This is a very, very serious issue. And so definitely we could see a domino effect. And we've been working on this coalition for several years, and we would definitely not want to see all our hard work, go to waste. If as you say, in our choir, people are starting to, break from the ranks. So definitely this could lead to a very serious domino effect, not only on, how we feel about Judaism, but also, damage Israel's most, critical interests.
So I could picture the meeting taking place at the Reut Institute boardroom, where many of us are gathered there, very passionate, talking about this. Back to the scenario, many of us are saying we should shift away from the work of the coalition and focus internally. What are the seeds that the coalition is planning today, towards the end of 2021, that could maybe eliminate this kind of a scenario in 2025?
Mm-hmm. So I have to emphasize something. First of all, the coalition, we work inside of Israel. And so this is sort of our mandate. We see ourselves organizing and coordinating the organizations within Israel. And when you're asking, what could we sort of do now that would maybe prevent? I think what Reut brings to the table, and I think Naama would agree with me, is the ability to create a shared understanding and a very concise framing of the topic and of the issue. The reason that the Reut, a think tank, is organizing this coalition is because most of the organizations are deeply invested in their fields, with their, with their participants, with their members, with their day-to-day issues. Reut, we try to see things a bit from, from bird's eye view, and try to see, the things that are coming from afar, sort of the challenge that and the scenario that we're dealing with now. So first of all, we need to frame, we have to make people lift their head above the water and learn about what's happening. Have shared conceptual frameworks, because when we will meet a crisis like this, and maybe not like this, but we'll meet a crisis, will we even have shared language to understand what we're experiencing? Because that's the most important thing. If we had shared concepts, shared framing, a shared place to hold this dialogue, then, we'll be able to deal with the people who want to break ranks, and we'll be able to deal with it. But so that's sort of the framework that we need to lay down now and work on all the time. And that's what we're trying to do. I think that's a very important part of that.
Beautiful, thank you. Naama, could you talk a little bit about how would you rally people around this concept? Because definitely we need the masses, we need the volume. Barak mentioned the volume being 100. How do you rally people about the positivity of the Jewish coalition?
There are a few strategies on how to harness people to our common cause. I think our most effective tool is that we've framed a very strong vision. We're talking, so Barak talked earlier on about how we do not agree on everything. Most of the topics are controversial within the coalition, but we do agree that in order to make sure Zionism succeed in its purpose, we have to connect the Israeli society to the Jewish people. And this is our vision, connecting Israelis to the Jewish people. And we have managed to harness a lot of people so far by utilizing this vision, by making this vision a work plan. And I believe that in the future, maybe even in the long-term future, this vision will still be harnessing and favorable for many other new actors in the field. I would say that some of our work is covert and some is overt, because we do work on public campaigns and we do publish letters from the coalition on different issues and topics, from politics to messages of solidarity through Passover at the first Passover of COVID-19 in 7 languages, including Yiddish. That was very specifically important to us in this context. But we also work one-on-one with senior officials of governmental branches. Some of them are also as individuals, members of the coalition. And we also work with elected officials. We come to them with ideas, offerings, partnerships, and we will be utilizing all these relationships once we're facing something that can damage Israel's ability to be a meaningful homeland for the entire Jewish people. I can give one example that we were very active in. So the coalition now is about 430 leaders and organizations, extremely diverse. And one of our task forces, we have 9 task forces, but they're active in very, very different levels, according to mostly opportunities. Our most active group now, I think, is the policy group. Yeah. And we had some very significant successes, but I think the first one was when they were talking a few months back to close down the Knesset committee on the Aliyah, diaspora, and absorption. It was about to be assimilated into a different, very generic committee. And we understood that it's a strategic threat, that since this is the relevant committee to engage with topics that are talking about our relationship with World Jewry. And this policy team, composed with very talented people, we've approached 9 different strategic political actors, and we got a very direct feedback that we had some impact on the bottom line. This idea was annulled and completely were taken off the table. We weren't the only entity that made this move, but we were the only civilian, leadership-based, voluntary organization that said, this is important to us as citizens. This is who we are. We stand for other hundreds of Israeli leaders, and our voice got to be heard. I think that was the first example to our public activity that managed to harness partners to the way.
So it's interesting, Naama, because you mentioned that it's the only civil coalition. Maybe one of the ways to eliminate such scenario in 2025 is to form or to encourage other groups to form other coalitions, maybe coming from different agendas, but all in favor of this unity between the Jewish people. Is this something that the Jewish Coalition has been thinking about, to broaden the spectrum of other like entities?
So,
Good question. Maybe, Barak, I'll take it, and then I would be very curious to hear what you think. I think that we need many, many partners, but coalition is just one instrument. We need other instruments happening now, and we need a lot of different diverse resources to utilize different course of action. What I think would be beneficial from our standing point is to make sure that the care and the importance of the Jewish people within the Israeli society bears political importance, that it has its own political capital. And what Barak will try to do in the next few years with this favorable government is to make sure that all these good intentions can be political capital, something that the Israeli voter, the Israeli citizens cares about. The good news are they do care. They already care. It's painful for them when they think that American Jewry is betraying Israel, or whatever way a common Israeli would frame the crisis. But we need to still translate it into something very that has significance on the Israeli agenda, and we will try to achieve it. Once this stage will be established, we will move much faster from complete ignorance and arrogance to long-term commitment. So this battle over political significance is our next, I think, frontier.
Thank you. Barak, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I really agree with Naama's approach. I think this coalition organizing, it has a lot of strengths, but of course it has its boundaries. And I think creating political capital and different, venues for action is, of course, extremely important. I will say about broadening the coalition, this is definitely something that we need to do. We need to bring in a lot of different organizations that have a lot of influence, that are not thinking, Jewish peoplehood. I'll just bring an example. Like, let's talk about high-tech companies that are growing in influence, in numbers, in economics. Of course, they're private sector. They're dealing with cyber and delivery apps. I don't know. What's their connection to Jewish peoplehood? What's their relationship? When you have, so there's got to be something. You have Israelis and Jews working all over the world, especially in Israel. So there is something here. In this kind of crisis, will we have to sort of pull them to work with us, or will we be able to create the infrastructure that sort of, very powerful companies in the private sector? And by the way, we already saw this, for example, during the last operation in Gaza. We saw letters circulating around in Google about boycotting Israel. So obviously it's an issue that the Israeli high-tech industry needs to deal with, and that's just an example. So there's definitely many other industries and sectors that need to go through this process. And in many ways, the whole Israeli society and industry, we saw it as a Zionist emprise. So of course, when we're talking about sort of updating Zionism, quote unquote, and bringing in Jewish peoplehood and manifesting it into Zionism, then it has to take that stage. I'll also add that it depends if we create sort of our counter, partners in the United States, for example. Who are the organizations that we're working with? Do we have some kind of similar coalition? Are we going to mirror, the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition in the United States? Or are we going to build a different structure, suitable to the characteristics of the American Jewish society, but one that can speak and talk to and communicate, instead of us just having each our, individual pathways to American society? Are we going to be able to have some kind of shared conversation on a stronger level? I will also say another issue is, who are the leaders? Who are the leaders? One of the big issues that we saw in creating the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition was that we identified that the traditional leaders and moderators of Israel and World Jewry were sort of losing their clout. They were also, there's a generational shift in Israel, in the United States, all over the world. Are we cultivating the leaders of Jewish peoplehood? I think me and Naama are sort of an example. Not that we're, the biggest leaders, but we're both people who didn't plan on a quote unquote career in Jewish peoplehood. Okay, me and Naama could have been in really different fields professionally, but different issues brought us to center our lives in this issue. What are we doing to bring the other Baraks and Naamas to be part of this industry, to be part of this professional field? So that's something we're thinking about, and I would think seriously be a factor in such a crisis.
I love what you said earlier about high tech. I think that that's extremely creative. I flew in from Israel to San Francisco this morning, and I think half of my flight was people from Israelis coming to do some business here in the Bay Area in terms of the high tech field. And they are integrating with Americans, Jews and non-Jews alike. They're definitely influential. So I think that that's a brilliant avenue to explore and to see how we could leverage that opportunity. So I really think that there's a lot of hope there. I want to do this dance. We're planning this game of talking about 2025, but basically it's a dance between present, future, and also basing on the past. So in Israel, we know that the Kotel compromise is hopefully back on the agenda. But Naama, you mentioned earlier how it's on the agenda, but so many Israelis are just indifferent. They're not aware, they don't care. It's not something that, it doesn't burn in their kishkes. What can we do to educate ourselves, us in Israel, that the Kotel is eminent in our agenda, that it's not secondary, and it's this Jewish thing with World Jewry. It's actually needs to be high in the agenda, and we shouldn't let go until it's resolved. How do we educate ourselves?
So I'm asking for your permission to answer this question quite bluntly, because I think I have spent hundreds of hours thinking about the cotton issue. And first and foremost, I think it's became the symbol for the current challenges, for the current rift, if you'd prefer, because of the significance of the Kotel as a Jewish site. But it does not create the problems, or it would not solve the problems, but it does symbolizes, and symbols are important for people and for the Jewish people specifically. And this is why it's not a lack of importance, but it's not the real issue. It's often just the surface. And I think that if you would look at the issue of the Kotel as an Israeli issue, to put it bluntly, if it's a real estate belongs to the government of Israel, the current arrangement has some logic into it. It's not equal rights, it's not egalitarian, but it does serve the vast majority of Israelis. But if you think the Kotel belongs to the entire Jewish people, and the Israeli government is only managing it in favor of the Jewish people's strength and unity, the framing, the picture is completely different, since the Jewish people is different than the one we see in Israel, and it requires different set of arrangements. And I think the only way to harness big audiences in Israel in favor of even caring of what's going on there, or even be in favor of the Kotel plan, the new Kotel plan, is to make sure that the framing is Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people, and we have to manage this holy site, this Jewish symbol, in favor of Jewish unity in these difficult times. This is the only slogan that can work, because the Israeli emotion towards the Jewish people is still very strong and warm. We can work with that. And my biggest fears are, and I am closely tracking what's going on in this front, is that the way to reestablish the Kotel plan would be more destructive than productive. I think it's not just what are we doing there in the Kotel, it's also how do we get there, and the way there is extremely important. If we'll do it correctly, we can mend, we can heal some of the rift, the internal rift in Israel, the external one between Israeli Jewry and World Jewry, and even if it would take 3 more years, but the way to get there will be building on our infrastructure as a people, I think it's worth it. And my fear is that for political personal gains of whomever, because so many people are in favor and involved, it's not just one party or one politician, this issue will be hijacked and mistreated and might even causing more damage to our cause at the end of the day. Even though a place for all streams in the Kotel might be looking favorable to causes of peoplehood, I firmly believe that the way together should be also productive. And we shouldn't exclude one party in order to include another party. We have to be creative. We have to strategize. We have to plan it as an opportunity and not just as an achievement. I think I was blunt enough, and I hope I haven't made anyone too angry in this Chag of Hanukkah, but this is actually what I think.
I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. Barak, you mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, did you want to add something to?
Yeah, I just want to add a bit about what Naama said about the Kotel.
Sure.
And sort of connected to what she said before about, political capital.
Mhm.
The funny thing that I think we're seeing now is the Kotel, or worrying, is that the Kotel is suddenly becoming sort of a wedge issue within Israeli politics. We saw this a few weeks later when certain parties on the opposition from Shas or from Likud suddenly, bring up the Kotel issue as a way to sort of, push the coalition and push the government. And that's something that worries, because from maybe people being totally indifferent about the Kotel, the crisis suddenly, brought the political parties to understand, oh, there's, we can play some political games with this. And I think one of the best ways to deal, it's a big thing to ask, but political, sort of having stability, political stability within the Israeli government. Sometimes we need to take our time. We're coming out of years of political crisis. We have to have a government that people, that see a job at the government as more job security than a Volt driver. We have to take our time and build a stable government so that they won't take these issues and turn them into issues of political wedge issues.
I totally agree with that. Barak, I want to take you back to what you said earlier. You said that the coalition is focusing on Israelis, but we are working with some other organizations, and you mentioned North America. Could you talk a little bit about organizations that are beyond the second largest Jewish community in North America, which in Europe, in former Soviet Union, in South America, and in other parts of the Jewish world?
So I think that's always a big issue, because when when 90% of the Jewish people live either in Israel or in the United States, for natural reasons, the European and Eastern European, Western European, South American, etc. communities sort of always get less attention. But definitely we have a lot of really important representatives. So I think, like, at the beginning of COVID was an amazing example of how, sort of people within the coalition fundraised, people who had ties to the Italian Jewish community did an amazing fundraiser working with those communities over there. I think we have a strong presence of people who are working within, Great Britain, a lot of people in South America. I think one of the biggest organizations that we need to, sort of pay our respects here, even though they're an old organization, is the Jewish Agency. And remember that that's an amazing network, international network that we need to use. I think that's sort of the big strength of going out to the more remote, small Jewish communities. For instance, I worked with Hakel, which is an organization that works with Jewish intentional communities all over the world. I worked with, communities in Düsseldorf, Germany, 5,000 Jews, and went over there and there's so much richness. But to reach out to those small communities, I think we need to remember that we need to do it a lot of times through more traditional organizations, because the new organizations usually can't take risks on really remote communities because they need to survive, they need to prove themselves. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is those communities is sort of create bridges between the sort of new upcoming organizations that work with the more traditional institutions.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we have some questions from our audiences, and because we don't have a lot of time, I'll share the questions, and if you could just share some quick answers. Here is a question that I personally love because I'm a strong believer in the power of the Hebrew language. So the question is, how would the relationship between Israel and diaspora Jewry change if all diaspora Jews were fluent in Hebrew? Naama, Barak, any of you want to take this?
Sure. So we are students of Avraham Infeld that talks about peoplehood as a set of 5 meta values, and you have to choose at least 3, so you'll have at least one in common with each and every other Jew on earth. Hebrew is absolutely one of those assets, since it's the key to have some literacy in your history and culture. We had few languages, but Hebrew is definitely the most prominent one. And I believe if we would have been fluent in Hebrew as a people, our access to each other and our sense of unity will automatically grow. It's absolutely a worthy front. But I also recognize that we cannot put all of our eggs in this specific basket, since it's been proven as a very tough challenge, but it's a worthy one.
You know, I'm fortunate to be sitting here today from the Oshman Family GCC in Palo Alto, where one of the most beautiful Hebrew initiatives, Beged Kefet, a product that came out of this GCC and is now being delivered to many other organizations extremely successfully. I think that the Hebrew language is definitely a very important piece of the chain that we should utilize, and we're not doing enough to do that. So I think that we could only grow, the relationship could only grow from there. Another question coming from our audience is, there is a crucial question on the foundation of Jewish identity. Is it just about being part of a people or rooted in Torah and tradition? And I think this is really fascinating for us in Israel as well. The question, am I Israeli? Am I Jewish? What am I more, etc. So I think this is all blends together. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts.
So I think, this is a question, it's a seminar, because anyone who thinks that he has the question to what is the Jewish people? Who is a Jew? Jew, it's a religion, it's a people, it's a nation, it's a culture. It's all of them, it's none of them. So without, I don't want to seem like I'm evading the question, because I do think that what we're bringing here is sort of with the idea of peoplehood. Again, it's sort of a new idea in Judaism, because Judaism is thousands of years. So this is a more new idea, and it is a modern idea. In many ways, I see Jewish peoplehood as a concept that sort of lives in the global era, of globalization, of slowly, without being a prophet, but where will the nation states be a century from now, 2 centuries from now? Obviously, things are going to be different. Jews, we don't think in, terms of years and months. We think in centuries. We think in millennia. And when we're talking about the world changing and how Jews across blurred borders and global conglomerates and corporations and shifting identities and people holding 3-4 passports and interface families and Judaism that is rapidly evolving, not only in the United States, Judaism and Torah reading is changing, but also in Israel, where we think it's more conservative. In the religious communities, there's a lot of evolution. And Torah reading, Torah is not, in my opinion, is not a constant. Torah is the most alive and moving text probably that humanity ever wrote down. And I think, I don't want to say if it's rooted more, I think we all have a different relationship to Torah and to, the religious texts. But I also want to say that someone who is a pure atheist and a rejection of this tradition is a full member of the Jewish people, is a full member, not less than anyone else. So I think that's a big challenge that, in my opinion, we're more leaning to.
And Naama mentioned our mentor, Avram Infeld, who always says Judaism is not a religion, it's people. So I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for one more question. If relations between Jews and the United States and Israel is not contentious, how or what do you see as way to continue the relationship?
I want to take this first. I think it's actually some sort of a summary question to the simulation, to the war game we've had earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something very clear. And I'm addressing it, I think, to the members of the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition in Israel and maybe to future members of an American twin coalition. And what I want to say is that we will never let go. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. We won't abandon, we will not betray the concept of Jewish peoplehood. It's our fundamental identity. And even if we'll end up losing a generation or two, which would be very sad and very unfortunate, and we work very hard to prevent this, but even if we will re-meet their grandchildren. We won't let go, because this is what brought us here. Thousands of years after this family, these people left to Egypt and from Egypt, this concept is what brought us here. And I firmly believe this concept will escort us moving to Mars and beyond. So this is the only way to mend it. And this is the only principle. The how to get there, the what will we do and when, it's just technicalities for me. It can get much worse, and still us from the Israeli side, we guarantee that we will not let go. We will not betray or abandon this concept of peoplehood. This is the master plan.
And Naama, as a member of the coalition, I can only agree with what you're saying. And therefore, I think that the likelihood of this scenario in 2025 to actually happen doesn't exist because of the passion that lies there today. So I share that testimony with you. There's one last question that I didn't think that we have time, but it's a very interesting question. Does the coalition engage with very polarizing political issues like settlement building? If so, how can we learn what positions your group are taking? If not, how do you build a better peoplehood of Israelis outside of partnership politics? So this is a loaded question. Mm-hmm. I hope that you could see Barak and Naama, the question on your chat, so you could look at it again.
Yeah.
Barak, it seems like you want to address it.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition is not a group that has a stance. Maybe we, on very specific issues, will be able to rally a good percentage of people on some kind of opinion. But we don't have a stance. And we have ultra right-wing members in the coalition and radical left-wing members in the coalition. Do we engage with polarizing issues? Sometimes, not always. It's a delicate dance, because you need to see that you're not losing the community to the conversation. And if you want to hold a hard conversation, you have to create the space for that conversation. Obviously, during the past 2.5 years in COVID, this is difficult, because when things go online, they can go south really fast. And obviously, the ability to engage with really polarizing issues like settlements, for example, these are things that need space. These are things that need time. These are things that need respect. So definitely, of course, these are things that people are talking about. We have, I think the beautiful thing of the coalition is that there are many leaders there. There are people that are CEOs, presidents, people who built their own organizations. No one is going to tell them how to think, and no one's going to tell them how to express themselves, and they do that. And I think the beauty of it is that we need to remember the coalition is an informal organization. It's not incorporated. There's no formality binding people together. Everyone can just, tomorrow just leave the WhatsApp group, for example, denounce themselves and disengage from the conversation. And people are bringing that in. And we also had things like that in the past. People saying, "Oh, this is too much for me." We have to be honest. These are things that happened. It's too overwhelming. So we have to do that. And I think one of the beautiful things that I really like about Jewish society in Israel is the fact that we really all have to live together. I live in a neighborhood where we're Haredim, Arabs, Jews, immigrants, academics, poor, rich. We have to, we can argue, but we're going to get on the same bus later. There's no other choice. So definitely we do engage with those issues. I think not as much as we should. And that's something we definitely need to work on and find those spaces.
But I actually do remember that we had a few occasions where there was a political, and it was fascinating. And it started from something very practical, but people reacted. And I think when people reacted, they didn't as much react from their personal perspective, but in terms of thinking about the Jewish Peoplehood Coalition, thinking about a broader perspective, wearing the Jewish Peoplehood hat and not their personal hat, which I think that achieves the goal of the coalition. So I think that's actually a blessing. Naama and Barak, you each have 60 seconds for a final statement, and then I'll wrap it up. So
Okay.
Naama, let's start with you.
I think one valuable insight I can share in this room is that I think we have a huge window of opportunities to enhance the approach of Jewish peoplehood today. In Israel, there's ripeness, there is willingness to speak about this issue, to learn, there's curiosity, and you can just speak about this issue and create importance of the Jewish people for Israelis today. Outside of Israel, I think that the biggest risk is that due to COVID effect, communities are getting more focused internally rather than externally, but distances are becoming less important. And there is also some levity in Jewish education in North America specifically. And we have to make sure we're seizing this specific minute in time to make sure our people stay one people in the future. Our future challenges will be very different. I think it will be an outcome of our biggest success in recent centuries, but we have to be prepared. We cannot solve anything we need by using the words aliyah, anti-Semitism, etc. We need new words. And on our end, Barak and myself as a member of the coalition with all of our friends, we'll keep making sure that Israel has relevancy as the Jewish homeland, and we keep asking ourselves, what is our role as the Jewish homeland, which is the original purpose of Zionism.
Thank you.
So that's what I wish us.
Thank you, Barak. You have 40 seconds now.
40 seconds. In short, look, I think Israel is a real miracle. And the Jewish people are a real miracle. And I'm saying it not from a religious standpoint, but from a humanistic standpoint. And Jewish continuity is extremely important. And Am Yisrael Chai is something that I live by. And I will add to that more of Jewish continuity, we need to ask ourselves, why Jewish continuity? What is our purpose? And I think when we're talking about Am Sgula and being a chosen people, it's not that we're a people who are better. It's the people who have a purpose, who have a role. The Jewish people have a role today, not only for ourselves, but for humanity. If I was talking before about polarization in Western society, how are the Jewish people an example of dialogue, of community, of humanism, of holding differences, of creating, healthy and shared societies? I think that's my passion for the connection between Israel and World Jewry. That's why I do it. I think because this connection is critical for Israel and it's our character. And without this connection, Israel will go to a very bad place. And the same goes for World Jewry. Without a connection to World Jewry, it will go to a very bad place. And this is not only something that's problematic for Jews. At the end, the Jews have an important role, in my opinion, in the world. So that's why we need to take care
And
of
I think
ourselves.
more than anything, Naama and Barak, I think that you established today, thanks to you, we established today the notion that there is great passion in Israel among Israelis that are members of the Peoplehood Coalition to never let the 2025 hypothetical scenario to be a reality. I think there's great work that has been done by you and by your colleagues and the members of the coalition to avoid such clash and to better the world and the relationship between Israel and World Jewry. And tonight is the last night of Hanukkah in Israel. I believe that the Chanukiot in Israel were lit a few hours ago. We will lit our Chanukiah here in Palo Alto in a few hours. And more than anything, I think that the Chanukiah with the different candles and the different lights and shapes and forms and colors resemble the Jewish people. Wherever we may be, we are different, we are unique in our differences and our cultures, but we all share the one hope and one passion and one love for the Jewish people. Back to Avram Infeld, the notion that we are one people and we will always be one people and will never allow any kind of terrible scenario in the future to take this and rub this away from us. So thank you so much, Naama and Barak, for sharing your passion and your great and important work for the Jewish people. A few housekeeping notes that I would like to share with you. Here in Palo Alto, we're going to take a lunch break. So you're welcome in Israel to take maybe your dinner break or wherever you may be around the world. The conference here in Palo Alto will continue at 1:00 p.m. Pacific time. So please, if you can, tune back to join the experience and participate in the last part of the workshop. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter to receive updates about Z3. And in the coming month, the Z3 team will share a report from this future workshop because there are other sessions that are happening simultaneously here in Palo Alto and on Zoom. So we will all be able to be educated on what happened in other rooms. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. And let's never, ever stop talking and caring about the Jewish people. Goodbye from Palo Alto, and thank you, everyone.